Hello and good evening from Rwanda's capital here in Kigali, and many thanks indeed for joining us on this Wednesday edition on RwandaTV. These are the top stories for our viewers in Rwanda and across the world. New diplomatic envoys of Tanzania and Libya this Wednesday afternoon presented their letters of credence to President Paul Kagame at Village Rugwiro. Rwanda Development Board registered investments worth $3.7 billion in 2021, up from $1.3 billion in in 2020. The government of Rwanda is in talks with global social media companies to join the fight against genocide denial through censoring hateful and genocide denial speeches as the country prepares to begin 100 days of commemorating the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Many thanks indeed for joining us tonight for tonight's broadcast. I'm Ethan Tashabia. You're watching RTV News live from Kigali. This Wednesday afternoon at Village Rugwiro, President Paul Kagame received letters of credence from Major General Richard Mutayoba Makanzo, the High Commissioner of the United Republic of Tanzania, and Ibrahim Sidi Ibrahim Matar, the ambassador from the state of Libya. The new envoys committed to strengthening trade cooperation between Rwanda and their respective countries.
My focus, of course, is wide, but we have to look at the, apart from the interactions among our people, we understand Rwanda is a business partner with Tanzania, because Tanzania is connected to the Indian Ocean, and we have Dar es Salaam port and Tanga port, which of course saves all the goods that comes in Rwanda. So our role is to make sure we smoothen the business between these two countries and look at the challenges that are facing the business community. We minimize them, and of course from Dar es Salaam to here Kigali, for the trucks takes too long. You understand the nature of the roads and whatever. So in the near future is to look at how to simplify the movements by either a railway line, which of course is cheaper for the transporters and the final consumer.
That's the new envoy from Tanzania there speaking to us earlier on after presenting their credentials to President Paul Kagame. Now, in other stories, as Rwanda gets set to begin 128th commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi this Thursday, Rwandans are being urged to take part in all activities and programs planned during this period. That means a lot in the history of Rwanda, as well as the country and the humanity in general. Sam Karisa reports.
At the national level, the national event to kickstart 100 days of commemorating for the 28th time the 1994 genocide that was perpetrated against the Tutsi will take place at the Kigali Genocide Memorial in Gisozi. Prior to the keynote address of the day at the village level, discussions on the history of the genocide against the Tutsi will be held, which the Minister of Local Government, Gatabazi Jean-Marie Vianney, urged everyone to participate in. On Thursday from 9 a.m., all citizens should attend discussions at the village level. It would be better if they get at the venues earlier so as to follow the speech of the President of the Republic from there. Also, flags must be lowered to half-mast as it has been ordered by the UN and as a way to honor genocide victims. Local leaders should also partner with Ibuka so that all the commemoration activities can be held in adherence to COVID-19 prevention measures. We encourage Rwandans, especially the youth, to prevent genocide from happening again in Rwanda and anywhere else in the world.
Guharanira ko jenoside itazongera kubaho haba mu Rwanda ndetse no ku isi yose.
The Minister of National Unity and Civic Engagement, Jean Damascene Bizimana, explains that additional events such as the Walk to Remember will not be held this time, where the evening vigils will be held, but with a limited number of participants due to COVID-19 pandemic.
Ku mugoroba ikiriyo nabwo kizabera kuri radio na televiziyo hari abatumirwa.
The commemoration night will be held on the Rwanda television as there will be guests to talk about measures to deal with trauma. There will also be guests like artists, so even though people won't be at the stadium, they will be able to follow the commemoration vigil virtually as they get the knowledge on how to deal with trauma that is still evident. On the district level, commemoration activities will be done, but a few people will attend that, especially those in administration, and pay homage to the victims at every district genocide memorial site. Then activities carry on at the village levels. Genocide Survivors Associations expressed gratitude that this year, unlike the last 2 years, commemoration activities will be more effective as COVID-19 cases have reduced gradually. Egide Nkuranga is the president of Ibuka. For the past 2 years, commemoration activities were being done virtually, but some people were not able to participate because they did not have that technology. We could find people to assist them, but it wasn't enough. I would like to express gratitude that this year we will commemorate as it used to be, as we prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. But at least people will be able to commemorate together. On the first day of the commemoration week and the 100 days of commemorating for the 28th time the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, the Ministry of Local Government is urging everyone to take part in planned commemoration activities and avoid unnecessary movements, as normal activities will be resuming in the evening hours. Sam Kalisa, Rwanda Television News.
Thank you, Sam, for that report. Now, some young Rwandans said they are ready to participate in the commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi as one of the ways to continue learning about the history of the country, such that history does not get to repeat itself in future. Jen Mutoni has more.
At the Chimisagara Youth Center, about 300 young men and women came to study the culture, technology, reproductive health, sports and entertainment. They say the fact that they were born after the genocide against the Tutsi makes them more interested in the history of the genocide, hence taking measures to prevent it. Because we were young then, those that are older than us have been talking to us and we get to understand more. Parents also say that they are ready to accompany young people in commemoration events and, where necessary, help to explain the history of the genocide. A 15-year-old is an adult. He or she hears it from others. So you talk to him or her carefully and avoid harassing or intimidating him or her, training them to love and interact with others without discrimination. You understand what I mean? Yugusenge Isaiah, an employee in charge of public awareness at the city's youth center, says the youth has opportunities to be taught history, including the genocide against the Tutsi, which helps them to behave appropriately, especially in the period of commemoration.
Talking to young people beforehand helps them to understand what this period means, to know how to behave and the activities they should be involved in.
Professor Masao Francois, a university lecturer and researcher, says there should be more education to help young people understand the history of Rwanda and to ensure that the tragic history of Rwanda never repeats itself.
Because they are young, they still have more to learn or be taught to them, which means that they can't know it all at once. They will learn slowly by slowly. But in this period, they have to know that there was a genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. An example to show that bad governance, hatred, results to deadly ideas.
Professor Masabo Francois also said that the discussions held during the commemoration period are among the tools that can be used to help the youth understand the history of the genocide against the Tutsi. Jane Mutoni, RTV News.
In other stories related to Kwibuka 28, the government of Rwanda is in talks with the global social media companies to join the fight against genocide denial through blocking and censoring hateful and genocide denial speeches, including any posts that would negate the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Critics of the abuse stress that they are ready to deal with them during this 28th commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi. Innocent Mugabo has more.
Social media platforms are now used by different categories of people, with the youth dominating when it comes to accessing a variety of information. Only that some use it to deny and negate the genocide against the Tutsi, and others to sow hatred and division. As Rwanda approaches the 28th commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi, Social media users stress that they are ready to confront such elements who will spread genocide ideology. We always refute their publications through comments by giving them facts. We try to show them the importance of commemoration and why not to negate the genocide against the Tutsi. On the side of content creators, social media gives chance for everyone to share developmental ideas, but there are also those that share destructive ones. On my side, this is time to grieve with our friends, family, and all Rwandans. We were born after the genocide against the Tutsi. We should fight against these acts due to the fact that they played a part in lowering the youth of that time to participate in committing the atrocities. This can be either through posts or reporting the offensive content. The spokesperson of the Rwanda Investigation Bureau RIB, Dr. Murangira Thierry, states that in the last 3 years from 2019, 7 people have been prosecuted for genocide ideology-related crimes, belittling and denial and inciting divisions among Rwandans using social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. He encouraged content creators to remain conscious with what they publish. There are those who commit these crimes of spreading genocide ideology using social media. What I can tell them is that the wrong will never prevail. There are those that claim to be teaching true history. There is no problem teaching that history, but when you distort that history and want to cause divisions among us people or promote genocide ideology, then the law has to be enforced, and we urge people to commemorate peacefully, avoiding hurtful speech and jokes. The Minister of National Unity and Civic Engagement, Dr. Jean Damascene Bizimana, argues that it is difficult to bring to justice those who negate and deny the genocide against the Tutsi through social media from abroad. However, the government of Rwanda is in talks with global social media companies to address the issue. It is impossible to deal with those abroad, though the internet reaches Rwanda. What we are doing is engaging in talks with these companies, such as YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, showing them that all platforms that call for hate, discrimination, segregation, negation, should not be allowed to operate. Freedom of expression is guaranteed by the Constitution, but when it comes to hateful speech and negating the genocide against the Tutsi, one should be punished. The second problem is that most of it is done in Kinyarwanda, and such platforms use English and other languages, whereby it is time-consuming because it requires translation. This Thursday marks the start of the 28th commemoration week from April 7th to 13th, which ushers the country into 100 days of commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, which claimed the lives of more than 1 million Tutsi. Innocent Mugabo, RTV News.
Thank you, Innocent, for that report. Now, Rwanda Development Board registered investments worth $3.7 billion in 2021, up from $1.3 billion in 2020. This is the highest investment registration to date and was driven by strategic investment projects, according to Rwanda Development Board. The new investments are expected to create 48,669 new jobs, representing a 97% increase from the previous year. The government aims to create 214,000 new jobs from investments and other employment sources every year. Economic sectors that attracted the most significant registered investments in 2021 include construction, real estate, and manufacturing, which accounted for 72% of all investments registered. Construction accounted for 31%, real estate accounted for 26%, while manufacturing, including agro-processing, accounted for 15%. Now, other sectors that attracted significant investments are financial and insurance services, agriculture, accommodation and food services, energy, health, and ICT. Some of the investments registered in 2021 include $237.9 million by Ultimate Developers Limited for the development of Vision City, Phase 2, a $145.9 million investment by Rwanda Ultimate Golf Course Limited into the Kigali Golf Resort and Villa projects, a 20.7 million US dollars powdered milk project and a 22.5 million US dollar project by Global Electric Vehicle Limited to manufacture electric vehicles. Tourism revenues increased by 25% from 131 million US dollars in 2020 to 164 million US dollars in 2021. Now, the mice sectors generated 12.5 million US dollars in 2021 compared to 5.1 million US dollars in 2020. Total visitors arrivals increased by 2.8% from 490,000 in 2020 to 512,000 in 2021. Sports events hosted during this period significantly contributed to visitors' arrival and revenues. In exports, receipts from the exports of goods and services increased by 9.4% now, rather in 2021, from 1.9 billion US dollars in 2020 to 2.1 billion in 2021. Now, commenting on the 2021 performance, the Deputy CEO of the Rwanda Development Board, Chief Executive Officer Zephany Niyonkuru, says the record investments have been made possible by the government's economic recovery efforts post-COVID-19, including the 100 billion Rwandan francs Economic Recovery Fund.
These investments were registered and we had a record year because of the programs that the government of Rwanda has put in place in terms of fast-tracking the economic recovery in the aftermath of COVID-19 pandemic. So there are quite a number of programs that were put in place, but one of them, major one, was the Manufacture and Build to Recover program, a program which was established to provide incentives to members of the private sector who had some projects to implement related to construction, related to manufacturing, including agro-processing. So this particular program alone contributed around 1.2 billion in the 3.7 billion USD that we registered last year. So that's one. And then number two, as you may recall, the government of Rwanda also last year approved a new investment code, which provide also for certain incentives and quite a number of sectors. And so as we start implementing this new investment code, we have also seen quite a number of new investments coming on board as well. And then number three, talking of the specific sectors of focus, we also started last year. We attracted through the Rwanda Finance Limited a lot of investments related to finance were attracted. The country is positioning Kigali as an international financial center, so we also saw investments related to finance coming in. So those are the major drivers of the investments that we registered in 2021.
When we talk about the investments registered, are these investments that are actually operational right now or are in the pipeline?
It's a combination. There are some that have already started because we register projects which are at two levels. Some can be greenfields, completing investments coming on board. Others can be expansion of existing investments. Someone may have a manufacturing plant and say, I only had, let's say, 3 production lines, and I want to add line number 4 and number 5. Yeah. So those ones, it's really a continuation of whatever that was existing. Okay. But on overall, when you talk about a conversion, some investment, depending with the sector, will take between 6 months to a year. Others, 2 to 3 years. But if you talk of manufacturing, most of the times these ones they start almost immediately, because they simply construct a shell and then they order the processing plant, which they bring on board and start the actual manufacturing immediately. So it really comes back to the sectors. But again, programs like Manufacture and Build to Recover, are time bound. They're supposed to end next year. And the investors who benefited from this program, they are really doing their best to make sure that they complete the implementation. They really make the investment and start the production of the output of the investments.
Let's talk about the new ones, the new investments that come in place. Looking at probably the last 2 years, what is the rate at which they actually get to maturity and start being operational?
You'd said that if you take what was registered over the last 3 years, the implementation rate has been above 62%. But of course, the pandemic, had a certain, slowdowns.
Yeah.
But again, with these incentives that we are giving to members of the private sector, we expect to see more conversion. So 2022, we want to put a lot of efforts in making sure that what was registered be converted.
Yeah.
There are some that have started, there are some that have already started, manufacturing of goods, which are not only supplying the local market, but also exporting. But again, we want to make sure that we fast track the implementation and ensure that all of these values that were registered over the next 3-4 years, we have full implementation.
So there is a possibility that the new year, projected 48,000 new jobs could actually come to realization.
Exactly, and they may even go, beyond that, because these investments that we register, we have two categories. There are those who come and say, we need a certificate of incorporation, which is more of, which helps them to get even tax identification number. They get a number for them to be able to contribute for their staff under the pension fund. And in these categories, we register 10,000 of those every year. Yeah. But you have a second category where they come and say, we want to benefit from the incentives under the investment code. So they bring their business plans and say, I would take 3 years to implement my projects, and year 1 I invest this, year 2 I invest this, year 3 I invest this. So we have a full-fledged aftercare department which works with these investors to make sure that the projects or the commitment they made be converted and they start operations.
By outlining, perhaps, you could tell us where is the government's priority in terms of new investments? Is it in manufacturing or anything you could tell us? Probably you know better.
As the economy recovers, definitely with the manufacturing due to recover, we had a lot of emphasis on manufacturing, including, of course, group processing, and also, construction, ensuring that we fast track the projects that we have under our construction. And with the new investment code also, there are some new areas that were added in, which are really giving special attention, including, innovation, including ensuring that we bring alternative sources of financing, especially through the Rwanda Finance Limited, as they implement the project of making sure that Kigali becomes an international financial center. So we also have innovation parks, ensuring that you really have an ecosystem where you have entrepreneurs, providing IT solution or innovative solution to catalyze the rest of the economy, be agriculture technologies, education technologies, financial technologies, among others. So that's even why the government entered into partnership with Africa 50. Now we have a Kigali Innovation City, which is going to be a Pan-African innovation hub, and it's now, it has started operations. We have some, anchor tenant there, and implementation continues. So those are some of the key areas. But the idea is to make sure that as we boost the economic recovery and go back to growth levels, we also make sure that we recapture domestic market. There are several products that we've been importing where we can actually manufacture them locally. So there's that part of domestic market recapturing. And then there is also increasing on the export that we do in the region and beyond.
Fantastic. Very lastly, I understand sports events attracted, a lot of revenues for the nation. Could you actually tell us if there is anything that the government is doing to make sure that we continue to reap big from sports events?
Yes, so meetings, incentives, conferences and exhibitions, including actually sports, is one of the products that we, government of Rwanda has been strengthening to make sure that we diversify our, tourism offering beyond those who go for, Kagera game drive to see gorillas or to see some specific sites. So we're also putting a lot of emphasis on events, including sports. And the government of Rwanda has heavily invested in this, in ensuring that we really have infrastructure that will be helping us to achieve this. You saw the new cricket stadium, you know, the new golf, the Kigali Arena, the stadium of Mahoro is also being, you know, expanded. So the idea is to make sure that same as we attract big conferences, we also attract a sports event. Last year, we attracted, you know, we hosted BL. It was, you know, a big event. And then this year we're going to have also BL again. Last year we had Afro basketball. So we are really not only attracting these events that can take place here, but also even teams that want to come here and they do their trainings before going into to major competition. So sports is one of the priorities, especially if you look into the segment of events. And the government has really been making sure that the right investments into the infrastructure are done so that we can attract more events.
Zephany Nyonguru, the Deputy CEO of Rwanda Development Board, many thanks for your time.
Thank you too.
Now, in other stories, are you a beneficiary of the student's loan and you've not paid your loan fully? There's a new law coming for you. The Development Bank of Rwanda is preparing a new law that will help them enforce loan recovery for those who have not been able to pay their student's loan over the years. We have more of this report. Twahirwa Eric is one of the beneficiaries of government scholarship program for undergraduate studies. After getting a job in 2014, Twahirwa immediately began repaying tuition loan. He says that repayment of his loan will enable the government to continue supporting the young generation to study. It was in 2014 that they started deducting money off my monthly salary to repay the tuition fee until it was fully repaid, and they stopped. The fact that we paid will help our brothers get the money they need to pay school fees and be able to study as we did. Lugaruza Jean-Claude, on the other hand, was also sponsored by the state, said that he had started repaying the student's loan until he changed his job and the system could not trace him, due to the fact that BLD officials did not bring the required paperwork to complete the repayment plan and therefore stopped repaying the loan. He urges custodians of the student's loan scheme to streamline their recovery plan so that beneficiaries can repay their debts. Our human resource gave us forms to fill and were handed back to BLD, but we are yet to start repaying the loans. Many people are willing to pay, and they have been working with corporate executives to find out who is not paying. I don't think it is very difficult to find out who paid the small part and those who did not pay, because there are those who pay more than what they are actually supposed to pay. Since 1980s, the state began offering students' loan to be repaid after beneficiaries have graduated and started earning, paying just 8% of their income. However, the Development Bank of Rwanda, BLD, which monitors the repayment of these loans, does not specify the amount of money that has already been repaid by the beneficiaries. Rurangwa Wilson, education officer at BLD, explains that under the so-called MINUSA program, it is planned that the beneficiaries of the loans will be identified through technology and information sharing with various agencies.
Twahuje ikoranabuhanga rikoreshwa kuri IPPS iriya system ya leta.
We have combined the technology using Mifotra's IPPS with the Rwanda Revenue Authority because anyone with income or tax would be found in Rwanda Revenue Authority. We'll go into a company like RBA and get a list of employees and their IDs and then identify our beneficiaries, how much their salaries, because in Rwanda Revenue we see it, how much does one have to pay. Otherwise, we'll do the math and send the list to the company and tell them that here are your employees and money they have to pay.
The
Development Bank of Rwanda also explains that the provisions of the new law governing the repayment of loans to university students are expected to include penalties for the loan defaulters.
Twavuguriye itegeko riracyari muri process ngira ngo baheke bonye mwanya aza kubivugaho ariko
We have revised the law to make it easier for law reforms to add, while I'm not going to talk about the penalties yet, but this is to say that enforcement tools. How can we enforce loan repayment? What can we do for the defaulters? Otherwise, it was just punishment for those who don't want to pay. But what will happen if one completely defaults? We want to harmonize the law as that of Rwanda Revenue Authority because after all it is state money. It is important to link two databases to this scheme so that people can repay their loans. BLD says public and private sector employers should also play a key role in mobilizing stakeholders and expediting payment so that the money can be used to petition for new students. Currently, Rwanda has about 30,000 university students both in Rwanda and abroad under Students' Loan Scheme, and those government-funded students have to pay after graduation and the moment they start earning a living. Now, folks, that brings us to the end of tonight's bulletin. As we begin 100 days of commemoration, may we continue to remember, unite, and renew. From me and the entire news production team, we wish you well during these 100 days. I'm Ethan Tashabia. Bye for now.